I'm now going to show you how to add positive and negative decimals. But before I do, I want to make sure that we remember, and for right now, I'm just going to add together the decimals that are negative. And before I do that, I want to make sure that we remember how to add negative numbers that are whole numbers, in other words, called integers. Remember that an integer is all the whole numbers, like 1, 2, 3, 4, and their opposites, like -1, -2, -3, -4. So if I were going to add together the integers, -3 plus -2. If I were going to make a model of it using my little chips here, so I would have a -3, then I would add with it a -2. -3 plus a -2 is going to give me a total of a -5. So we had our little song that if they were the same sign, that little to the tune of row, row, row your boat, you might remember. Same sign, add and keep. If they're both a negative, just add them together and keep it a negative. Well, sometimes we mathematicians like to make things a little bit more complicated than they need to be. And in the case of decimals and positive and negative decimals, we really have made things a little bit easier for you, I think, because adding positive and negative decimals is just like adding together positive and negative whole numbers. Allow me to demonstrate. So just like the red chips on the previous page had minuses on them to represent negatives, here on our base 10, and don't forget, in case you haven't seen the our review videos on decimal addition in a while, remember that these guys right here are our units place. These giant cubes represent 1. I'm going to get rid of him right now. These little flats are our tenths place. Write that down here. The long rods are the hundredths place. And these guys right here, the little tiny cubes, are the thousandths place. So I'm going to use our base 10 blocks to model a negative decimal addition problem. And I'm going to model the problem negative, and I'm speaking very unmathematically right now, just FYI. Okay, I'm adding together a negative 1.75 plus a negative 1.006. So let's break down what these two numbers actually mean. So let's look at this one first. -1. So because that 1 is in front of the decimal, we know that that's a negative whole 1, or a negative unit. I'm going to use this red one right here to represent that it's a negative. We can see that our computer is tallying that for us, that this is a -1. Then our second digit, since it's one place behind the decimal, that tells us that this is the tenths place. And because there's a 7 there, that means that we need 7 tenths. So I'm just going to tap that, put 7 of the tenths right here. This 5 in the hundredths place tells us that we are going to need 5 hundredths. So there we go. There's 5 hundredths in there. So now we need to add to that a negative 1.006. So first of all, we add, just like we do in regular decimals, we go from right to left. So right now, there's nothing right here in the thousandths place of the top number. But we are told to add to that nothing 6 thousandths. So I'm going to add 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now what the algorithm looks like is I started out with none, then I added 6, so now I have 6. I started off in my hundredths place. I started out with 5. Then it tells me I don't need to add any, so 5 plus 0 means I still have 5 hundredths. I started out with 7 tenths. This is telling me not to add any tenths to that, so 7 plus 0 means I've still got 7. I'm going to bring my decimal straight down to differentiate, to act kind of as a border between my decimal and my whole numbers. Now it does say that we need to add a -1, a negative whole, to the mix. So I'm going to add a -1. And of course, the negative 1 plus negative 1 is 2. So for my grand total, I have negative 2.756, negative 2 and 756 thousandths. So you see that when you add two negative decimals together, it's just like adding two negative integers together. You just add them together and keep the negative sign. Let's do another one. And now I'd like to work the problem for you. Let's see here. So negative 0.647 plus a negative 1.24. So I am going to, and actually that negative 1, that's kind of looking like a 7 here, so let me fix that. Negative 1. Okay, so you should hopefully remember why when we're adding decimals, we line up our decimals. I'm going to start by making a model of this first number first. So it's a negative 0.647, which means I don't have any units. I need 6 tenths, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I need 4 hundredths, 1, 2, 3, 4. I need 7 thousandths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 thousandths. So I've got 6 hundredths, 6 tenths, 4 hundredths, and 7 thousandths, and they're all negative. That's why I used the red ones. Now it's telling me to add negative 1.24. So for our first problem, we add from right to left. So we started off with 7, but then we don't add anything to that, because we don't have anything in the thousandths place in this bottom number. So 7 plus nothing is going to be 7. So now I had 4 right here from our first number, and this is telling me that I need to add 4 more hundredths. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 4 hundredths plus 4 hundredths is 8 hundredths total. I started off with 6 tenths. Now this is telling me to add 2 more. So I'm going to add 2 more. 6 plus 2 means I now have 8 tenths. And last but not least, I started out with no units. This is telling me to add 1. So I'm going to add a negative. So now I've got a negative 1. So my final answer, and of course I need to put the decimal there to differentiate between my whole number 1 and the decimal number that falls after it. So negative 1.887, or negative 1 and 887 thousandths. So because I was just adding together a bunch of negatives, again, it just becomes one big old pile of negatives. So you add your two individual numbers together using the rules for decimal addition, especially keeping in mind lining up your correct place values. You can't add hundredths over here to tenths or vice versa. You can't just mash those together. You put tenths together, and then you put hundredths together, you put thousandths together. So you got to make sure you keep your decimals lined up, and since they were both negatives, it becomes a negative. If I'd added the positive versions of these numbers together, of course, that would have resulted in a positive answer. So if they're the same sign, you just add them together and you keep it. Let's do one more of adding two negatives together. So I've got a negative 2.63, and I'm going to add a negative 0.77. So my first number, negative 2.63. So I need to put two wholes that are negatives. So there's my negative 2. I need 6 tenths. So I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 tenths in my tenths place. And I've got 3 hundredths. 1, 2, 3. So 3 hundredths going on here. So I've got a negative 2 whole, negative 6 tenths, negative 3 hundredths. I need to add to that, working my way from right to left. Now I need to add 7 hundredths to the mix because I have 3. This is telling me to add 7 more. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But you notice on the paper, 3 plus 7 is 10. So I don't just write a 10 here underneath the 3. This is what you guys probably remember as carrying. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually take these 10 and lasso them together here so that they form a nice little flat, and I'm going to move it over there with the other flats. So now I don't have anything over here in the hundreds place. 3 plus 7 is 10, so there's the 0 for the 10 to represent the fact that I have no hundreds. And I got to take that extra tenth that I moved over here and carry it right there on my math problem. So now I have the 6 I originally started out with, plus the 7 I added, plus another 1 that I added over there also. So what's going to happen with all that? Well, I'm going to make myself a little pile here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh yeah, it would probably help, wouldn't it? So I have the 6 from the original problem, and then I have the 1 that I added over here. But now, hello, I need to go ahead and add the other 7 that should be there. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So now I'm going to make myself a little pile here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So I'm going to group those 10 because right now I have a total of 13. So I'm going to take 10 of them. I'm going to lasso them together. They become a nice little brick. I'm going to move them over here. So I do need to carry, so I added a 1 over here to my hole. Now I've still got the 3 that I left behind over here. So, or actually, nope, I've got 4 over here, don't I? Yep, I've still got 4 left behind. After I move that extra 10 over here, now I've got 4. Because I had 6, then I added 7 to get 13, plus 1 is 14. So I need the 4 to represent the fact that I still have 4 over here. I carried my 1. Now I had 2, then I didn't add any, but I do have the 1 that I added that I carried for a total of 3. So I've got a total of negative 3.40, or negative 3 and 4 tenths, or I could count this place value and say 3 and 40 hundredths. Either one. So as you can see, the rules still stay the same. When you are adding together two negative decimals, you still just add them together like you would normally add decimals together and just keep the same sign.